I am so excited to have you here. I've loved learning from you through different works that you've gotten a chance to talk about with us. All the work you've put into Velocity. It was awesome to hear Jesse Robbins also talk upon Velocity because it was like, wait, there's even more connections to Velocity conferences coming up. So, who are you? I'm so excited to have you here, but for all of those
Yeah.
listening,
So hi everyone. I'm Inés Sombra. I run data engineering at a company called Fastly, and we help make internet. So yeah, I am also the person that killed Velocity. The founder of my company, the company that I'm part of, was one of the people that helped it start. So it does very good things for your career to kill your CEO's conference. So that is me. I joined Fastly when we were small. I think we were maybe 150, and right now we're over 1,000 employees. So yeah, and it's been a minute, almost 6.5 years. So I've seen us go from small company problem to not so small company problems to large company problems in terms of like volume and scale. So hopefully some of the things that I picked up along the way are going to be helpful for folks who are watching. So
oh, definitely. And I mean, it's been that where you've done such amazing work at Fastly, but you've also done work prior to that around this as well.
yeah, I used to have a life and free time, and then I ended up with like having a toddler now, and then all of that free time has found a channel, and with a lot more energy than I have. So yeah, so that is
Oh,
what I've been up to lately.
I can't wait to hear how you've been juggling a lot of this as we go through today's session.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. Anybody that
but
is a parent through this pandemic will have this little vein next to their eye that just kind of starts tittling. So I got you. I see you. It's been a
I
thing.
I definitely think many of folks on the audience are super resonating on that. I know it's been hard to context switch and multitask all day. But when we go and talk about today's topic of reliability, kind of want to ask you, what is your personal approach to reliability? What's Fastly's way of approaching reliability? And along the questions is very much of trying to figure out how you manage that structure, manage such a large engineering organization, specifically around reliability. And I would love to know a little bit about the impact, but I know I just gave you such a large question. So feel free to break it up a little bit of what
Yeah,
you
we're gonna
see
take
best
the
fit.
yeah let's take the scenic route. So yes, it's a big topic, and I think my approach is a little bit unglamorous because I tend to like not prescribe a full solution and some sort of framework, and then I actually should pitch something. And now I think about it and come with something to sell with a fancy acronym, but it feels a little pedestrian, but has worked well for me. And I think it boils down to like just starting from where you're at. Like you gotta know where you're at, and then my approach is you take one tiny baby step forward, and then you take another, and then you take another, and then you take another, and you keep going. So when it comes to like system reliability and monitoring, um, you can start by keeping track of like where your system's sharp edges are, and then actually do something about them. Incrementalism and being able to keep in mind the scope and the constraints that you have at hand is also very important. If, for example, you're starting to work on a POC, maybe reliability is less critical to you than when your system has thousands of customers. Like the risk profile changes. So it may be 100% appropriate to take all of the corners and cut them all while you're just iterating or quickly scoping something. Um, than when you actually have customers that depend on your service being up, and you need to be a lot more thoughtful and then a lot more deliberate in how you make changes. Documentation, checklists, those things are great, but then it comes a point in your company where everybody's producing so much, if you're lucky, or the corpses of documentation, or the ghosts of documentation paths are so around that the density is so high that you can't tell what's current or not. So in our particular stage, we've transcended like wiki pages and documentation. You have to invest in tooling, but but like coming back to my first point is like none of these approaches are going to actually help you unless you frame them from to the conditions that you're in. So if you have a small team with small processes, then you may not want to roll in something that feels like super heavy, where you just like rolled out some sort of like help desk in Jira to do the work or organize questions where the organization well knows how to come and get a hold of you. So those are kind of like some of the ideas that come in mind. Something that has worked very well, that even as our size grows, we don't compromise on, is that every week we go and then we review every alert that fires. And I insist that every team in my organization does that, because it feels simple, but it's a very good way to start keeping an eye on what are your perennial problems and what are the things that destabilize, and then how you make sure that you keep an eye on like the state of your systems and how they change over time. It's like growth forcing you to reevaluate your assumptions. Are your alerts good? All of that I tend to like to see from like the perspective of where we are. If you're having a lot of incidents every week, like you need to start somewhere, and that's one of the approaches that I tend to do. In terms of incidents, they're gonna happen. Not wishing them away is like, you can't like really wish them away. They will happen. So what the best you can do is prepare for them. And they tend to happen more when your edges are sharp, when you're facing uncharted territory. If you build your system for a certain scale and all of a sudden the scale has quadruple, you're likely going to have some incidents and you're likely going to have some work to do. And again, process and tooling may help you, but it depends on where you are, whether you want to have something that feels too heavy, because you may be creating some unintended consequences. And unfortunately, you won't know after you made a mistake and your organization reacts to it. So yeah, it's interesting.
I think you bring some amazing points. I know that you still have more that you want to talk about on this question, but I definitely wanted to really call out that part where it's like it's gradual. You kind of can't start out from anywhere. And I definitely really loved where you mentioned that portion of sitting down with your team and really discussing those alerts. Because as being an engineer working in ops and SRE, it's just like you get so much fatigue and you never really know what's actually actionable, if you did the right thing, if you need to pivot and make things better for reliability purposes.
Yeah, and it's a special kind of despair that happens whenever you get woken up for something that you can't go change. So at the beginning of the week, on any sort of planning session that we have, those are one of the topics that we encounter first. And then any work that comes from that, like either we scale something up, we modify an alert, it comes as one of the first priorities for the week. So we have very small teams. Even in the organization that I have has gotten quite large over the last year, but it's still like very, very small targeted teams of like high performing individuals that are trying to move the needle. But what I really would like to have, or what I really stress, or is important to me, is to have an organization that doesn't burn individuals and feels humane. So if you're not going to address the causes of humanity, you need to sleep. So being waken up for things that you can't influence is actually like very disheartening. So I don't want to like enforce a system that goes in the opposite direction.
Definitely. And I mean, it's so important, and especially as we talk about reliability in today's world of the pandemic, where the human portion kind of became embedded, and many folks that kept it out of their work life, they don't have a choice.
Yeah. So, and if you have a system that other folks depend on, it's your bread and butter to figure out what works best for your organizations and teams, and how you can make progress in a way that is incremental and humane at the same time. So I hinted also in terms of like yes, we analyze them and then we tend to fund this. I am a true believer that you get what you fund. So you're not going to get something complete. You're not going to change a result unless you actually invest in it. You don't get a plant without fertilizer. It's one of the pandemic hobbies that I picked up. I'm the least patient person, but then gardening has been an awakening where you can just smother a plant to death, or you can actually give it the conditions that they need to grow, and you actually get much nicer results. So unless you fund it, you're not going to get it, or it's going to be really, really hard to get something. And you have to understand as a leader or as an organization what processes are appropriate for the group of folks that you have. So if you roll something that is too aggressive and people are not on board, Like that's not an effective process. So I tend to be very allergic to large things. If you have a group of four folks in your team and then your team is working well, then I don't like to change anything. But there's some slight incremental tweaks that we tend to do with the managers and the leaders in my organizations that I wanna roll as baselines. This alert
is there a specific question you like asking your team around those changes? I know in the Fireside chat earlier with Jeff and Matt, we really heard that they really always want to be asking the team as they roll out a lot of this incremental stuff. So now that you touch upon that topic, do you have a suggestion?
Well, I cheated because the teams that I have are mostly teams that started with 1 or 2 individuals and then we grew. I have had teams that just landed in the organization, and then the ones that are net new to me of a domain that is slightly adjacent to what I have, but with a new portfolio, for example, I would ask them what is working for them, what is not working. And then when the question is also like the magic, you have a magic wand, what is the one thing that you would change that would greatly increase your happiness in the job? And then you take that very seriously, and then seeing which way you can move the needle, or if the assumption is even something that you can influence. If fundamentally the response that you get doesn't align with the charter of the organization or even the intention of like the system, then you have some misalignment, and that misalignment could be just like a mismatch of expectations. And sometimes it's just like it would be a thing where like unfortunately like the nature of the problem is not best suited for what you need to do. It's like, so I guess like let me make that a little bit clear. If, for example, you're in a situation where the thing that would increase your chance of success is a system that doesn't break, but we are like 6 months away from that, then you can't shortchange that evolution and you can't shortchange that work. Or like sometimes the things that I hear is like in a perfect set of circumstances and scenarios, we would have made the pristine right choice. And I don't think that exists. So I've never seen it, a problem that starts so pristine, was so new, with no mistakes made. I've been in this industry for too long and have yet to encounter one of those. So at that point, those are the areas of work and conversation, and then just that's when just like this dialogue actually becomes very helpful.
And I mean, you kind of just set me up ready for that next question. Like what's coming next? What are some of the challenges that you see as you're leading your org that you don't really have an answer or solution for?
So I think about this a lot because mostly we are growing at a pace that pretty much voids every decision that I made in a shorter time that I'm used to. So at any given point, I assume that any decision that I'm going to make is going to have a shelf life, and then we're always going to be revisiting because today us or past us was far more less informed than the future us. The thing that I'm struggling with at this point is that even from an organizational structuring perspective, I think that the scaffolding that I'm about to lay is going to last me 6 months, and then it lasts me 3. So the thing that where this presents a little bit of conflict for me is like, how do I recalibrate and course align in a way that doesn't give people like the whiplash? It's like if it's just changed too quickly, then you feel like your ground is constantly shifting, and that's not great either. So basically, it means that in order for me to make better decisions, I need to think about time scales in different horizons. Things that are all right. If we plan for growth this way, then I have to add another indicator of like, say that I'm wrong and it's triple or quadruple, would this decision still stand? So it's a lot more pre-thought and a lot more almost just like guessing and a little bit more future telling. The scalability, like crystal ball. Are you going to get it right? You don't know. But as you go along, I think I have to just like my current mode of approach is like rehash a decision and then contrast it with all of the scalability profiles and see where it sticks or how long I think it's going to last me. And I can tell you I've failed miserably in the organizational design perspective because my last reorg, I thought it was going to last me 6 months and it has been 3. So now I have to go back to the drawing board and be like, yep, I miscalculated that time. So yeah.
It definitely sounds like you've definitely been able to pivot very much, and your team has been accepting of those changes. And one of the things that kind of comes to mind, and we also have this as a question from the audience, we see that Fastly has been on hyper growth mode. How is it that you've scaled those reliability practices as much as the growth has actually happened? And with that, it really goes back to how do you help those engineers really evolve?
I cheated. So every answer is going to be like, I cheated. So we deal with the data and the state in the company. Our systems are the ones that carry all of your metrics, all of your log lines, and we've been consolidating some of our skills within the organization and started like having organizations as a whole that become more platformy. So as we went along, we realized that in order for us to be reliable, we needed to own that piece ourselves. So 2 years ago, we started hiring folks and then building a team internally. And that has been very helpful because at the end of the day, what it has helped us do is even become more compliant because we have a data plane and we're investing on this data plane to have our own processes that allows us to operate more independently. So we ended up we had many models through the history and evolution of Fastly. We had embedded SREs, not embedded SREs, an organization that you go to. I prefer to have a much more verticalized approach where if you need something from an infrastructure or a storage system perspective, you go to the reliability team, and the reliability organization supports of the software pillars above. And now this year is going to be the verticalization upwards, where all of our interfaces share similar processes, and also how we derive insights from the data pipelines that we have. Like those expertise and those skills we're trying to develop as well. So we're basically going verticalized in both directions. We own our reliability. We reach, there's also like a platform and then a foundation organization where it's your traditional SRE at the company level. So we partner with them and then we start just like developing all of the skill sets that deal around storage and then state management. So I cheated by having my own, and also I partner with the greater SRE organization. And another thing that this is good, it has been helpful for us. I think actually I really prefer this model, especially because we have projects where we combine efforts and we move forward. But it also presents another challenge where it's like when you optimize for the state of your organization versus the greater good. So when you want to move the needle, you can solve the problem. And then it's always an exercise on looking down and making sure that your organization can run efficiently. But if there's something that can help everyone else to run efficiently, I'm a big softie. So we will go and be like, all right, let's help with this system. So this is how we also end up like making a lot more investment into how we onboard new engineers, and then how we think about compliance, and then the routine tasks that we have to do for all of these compliance levels that we need to have. So if you have an organization that is kind of like, I don't think that our journey is unique. I think at some point, depending on the requirements and also the commitments that your service or your team needs to provide the greater organization, it may be a path that you traverse as well. It has been helpful for us, and then we're breaking that apart even further into two focuses: the data storage, or like the storage systems themselves. Like this could be like your databases, your caches. This is at the application level. I'm not talking about the caches that you would have in a CDN, and also like the orchestration and the infrastructure pieces. So we want to keep those along, and then we want those processes to come to dictate like the baseline operational excellence patterns that we would have on the other pillars.
That's so awesome. I mean, that's solid advice. I know you mentioned you kind of cheated your way through it, or your crystal ball kind of worked.
Yeah. So yes, and also if you end up transitioning folks from the greater SRE orgs that come already with the permissions, that's amazing too. So yeah, if you're a leader during that side, just do give back your backfills to the other teams, because you also don't want to destabilize another side of the organization just because you want to get your house in order.
Yeah, really, really solid. And I mean, you really shared a little bit about how a lot of this has evolved. And as this conference really talks about failing and evolving, what story can you share with us about failing and getting up and doing it better?
I mean, pretty much every day is an exercise on like, oops, I got that one wrong. We have to go and patch up. We have several things that we have to recalibrate. I think for right now, the thing that comes to mind is that there's an element of luck that I'm having a hard time rationalizing even myself. When the mistakes that you make are not crippling mistakes or doesn't necessarily just like finish your business, then you can always still recover. I think the things that made it hard is that if you yourself as a leader don't believe that that's possible, that level of optimism, if you don't believe that the team can do it, then nobody can help you there. So just like don't lose the trust in the engineers and the folks that you have. But I cannot think of any decisions that we didn't have to backtrack. I think there's some things that I regret. Like, for example, there's to this point of like, when do I optimize for me versus a we? There are moments that I was like, nope, I'm gonna sit this one out. And then 2 years later down the road, it's still me trying to go and then just like fix it. So I don't think that I would have had the bandwidth for the one that I'm thinking about to help stabilize it. And then I think that we did better the second time, but I actually did sit it out and be like, yep, nope. It's like, we're too few. And I think that is actually one of the things about staying in a place for a longer term, is that at the end of the day, you will be the one that cleans up the mistakes that you made, because you can't abandon them. But also it actually makes you better too in terms of how you how you calculate risk. You know that as long as you come back, keep track of it, and then just like you clean it up, you're much more likely to make riskier decisions, or at least more deliberate compromises, because you know that you're gonna clean it up as you cleaned up the things that you had to before. So that is one of them. Yeah, and I'm just like, in this conversation, it's like it's coming to light to me that yes, is that this approach where like you're willing to iterate and meet the place where they're at, and then like try things without having this fear of the decision just blowing up in your face. As long as, again, there's like, you don't have, there's a few mistakes that are just like mistakes that are business ending. Just don't do those, or at least understand what those look like in your organization and steer away from them. And then the other ones, like you may have to just like take it one decision at a time. After 6 years is 6 years is like, I tend to you develop patience, so I tend to also pay attention to like the conditions. If like there's something really meaningful that I wanted to get done maybe 2-3 years ago, and then I couldn't, then I don't tend to like, or at least this is something that I've changed since I've gotten a lot older. Like it doesn't crush me as much as it did at the beginning. I tend to put a timer 6 months down the road. I will try it again, and if it doesn't work, do the same. And I don't pick more hills than I'm going like than viable limbs. So I pick the number of hills where I can just lose limbs and then still become alive. So that's a good way to rate limit myself as well. So, and keep an eye on my energy.
That's actually amazing. And I mean, as you share a lot of this, it really comes to Flourish, where you have been at Fastly long enough that you can talk about that tech debt and be like, ha, I made that decision 4 years ago. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I was real dumb. Like at that point, it was like, oops, that was the wrong choice. And then after you clean up a few, then it actually has an unintended effect that is like, it frees you up to, in a way, it gives you a lot more freedom. I struggle a lot with the first vertical that I was spinning, where I was just like, I was obsessed about finding the right answer. And then somebody told me that it's just like, you're doing something new. There's not going to be a book that you can go and refer to. You're going to have to make it as you go along. And then I was like very upset at that moment. And then now I'm like, look, yeah, we're just doing something novel. And then at that point, I follow the least amount of process that I can. And it's the most an interesting thing. Some of the most creative processes, or the ones that I enjoy the most, is whenever we're bootstrapping something novel.
Lean way is definitely the best way to go. So a little bit, like we've gotten to share a little bit about how the growth has actually impacted. And because we are still stuck in this pandemic, I was wondering, how is it that you helped your team and engineers really find that balance between moving too fast and moving at the right pace, especially with all the overload?
Yeah. So there's a few things. First of all, if the fact that we made it to this year is it's a huge achievement. Like you hear, you get a gold star, and like you made it through like a real doozy of the year. I don't know what it's gonna do to us long term. So it's unclear to me yet, because it's like the effect and the baggage and the things that have happened. There's some real trauma that happened last year, and even at the beginning of this year, like Texas losing power, and then people being without. That was like some very like calamity bingo. Like at that point, you just like you want the whole thing. I think the fact that we just made it through here and then we're still like chipping away at it is huge. So that recognition that you're still showing up is really, really important to make. In my particular my particular approach for my teams, basically we went to optional everything right away. Fastly was one of the first places that went to remote. Like we were early March. It didn't change much for us. I think that for folks that were living in cities like San Francisco, it meant that since March of last year, we haven't seen another human being. I haven't seen another human being that I'm not married to or created myself. And that will do things to you. So we try to make sure that the processes that we have and then the input loops that we were taking for folks in the organizations were open. So in my particular team, the process is where like we try to do copious notes, record things. I am mindful of the amount of Zoom, and I actually struggle about venues to replicate the hallway discussions, or even like where is our alignment, because I don't want to put another Zoom meeting on folks' calendar. And I haven't found a better way to replicate that human connection, and the fact that I have to look at myself in the screen like every day. It's just it's a little like, like in Finding Nemo, where like there's a fish in the fish tank flow, and just like you feel like you're like So there's some weeks where you feel like it's like flow, but yeah, like we try to make sure that things, or like that we play to our numbers. If there are folks that need to focus on one thing, then I try to make sure that I keep up with how they're feeling, and then just encouraging time off whenever is possible. Some folks, even if they take time off, they're going to be in the same small space with their children in house, and revisited our commitments, like nothing, like there was nothing that really you could predict. So at some point, getting super precious about something that was optional was just like make it very, very explicit whenever something was optional versus something was a commitment. If it was a commitment, we plan, and then we just slow it down. So a good thing that Fastly has done that I think has been universally loved is like there's one Friday a month where the entire company is off. We call them wellness days. They've been amazing. So that was good. And I think that there's a humanity and kindness that you still had. Like we didn't have childcare for 3 months and a half, and I was doing one-on-ones with my kid, just biting me in the arm and then just like learning how to walk behind me. And then yeah, folks have had like really hard situations. I think the moments that I struggle the most were whenever in a given week somebody lost a parent, and then they're just like the level of like things were like really, really hard. So just like not forgetting that you're working with people is, I think, like very, very critical.
No, that's really amazing. I think you really nailed it on the talk. We're wrapping up now, so if you want to continue this conversation, they can find you on Twitter, right?
Yes, I was semi-retired, but I will come out of retirement for questions. So yes, so I think I tend to flourish in organizations that are humane, and then they're just like, and then in teams that I luckily I have the ability to put some ground rules there, and it has been really, really helpful. Like I think about what organizations we want to be. I think about what teams and how we want to partner, and we try to make sure that at least the decisions and the processes that we're all in embody the behaviors of how I would like to be treated if I go to another partner team.
That's so critical. We want to thank you once again for joining me in this fireside chat, Ines. Hope all of you got a chance to learn something new today and keep these conversations going on reliability in your organizations.
And if you haven't, there's always a video with Chuck Norris like teaching you about incident management that you can go back, and then that's also going to be like pretty sweet. So yeah.
Yes, send that to your leadership team.
Yeah.
Well, thank you once again.